So again, my name's Suzi Yokley-Busby. All you really need to remember today, though, is two things. So you can just get that out of the way right now. Get a pen and get a paper. I put some folders on the table. There's one for each of you. And there's some extra white paper, and I have more if you want for note-taking. I like to draw pictures, so I'm probably going to ask you to draw a lot of them today. So somewhere, write someplace really big. And if you have a permanent marker, I ask you to do it in permanent so you'll never forget it. There's two things you need to take away from today. Two words: intentional and relationship. We should probably use magic markers and write them right on our forearm, because that's the pivotal piece to us being successful at anything we do. What we're going to talk about today is this: positive youth engagement. And what's the connection from that to juvenile justice? Well, if you watch the news or read the newspaper, we know the gaping hole already in between, before you get them to help and before I, as a public educator, lost them. What is that chasm in between? And how do we fortify one so in the long run it fortifies the other? And so also next to positive or next to intentional relationships, I want you to draw a picture like of the gingerbread man. I want you to draw a kid that looks just like that. Very basic gingerbread man. Uh-oh. We have a compromised one over here. So what does that have to do with intentional relationships, and what does it have to do with supporting the whole child? Well, when you go to a store to buy shoes, what department do you go to? Easy one. When you want to buy groceries, you go. When you want to watch a movie. Right. So by default, our society has already divided up the whole person. And we've done that to be more specific and become experts at things. But what happens for a kid in need and a kid in trouble is we get so busy on one part of them, we forget the rest. And you end up with a kid that's not a whole kid anymore. And I'm not a betting woman, but I'm guessing about 100% of the kids you work with are those kids. And it hasn't just been a kid issue in their life. It's also been a family issue. It's been a neighborhood issue. It's been a peer issue. It's been a school staff relationship issue. It's been a services issue. And sometimes you get kids in the middle that look really mean and really lazy. And the truth is, they don't have one stinking idea what's going on in their life. Because they might be focused on this piece, but for some reason, everybody else is focused on this piece. And we all lose sight of what's the most important, which is the whole child. So what we're talking about today is intentional relationship, because that's how we get back to helping that child become the whole child, and not eternally dependent on us, but figuring out how to be self-reliant as a whole person. Do you know any adults that still aren't quite there? Right. And more than likely, if you look back to them as a child, that's where it started. When you build a house, there's really only one way to do it: from the bottom up. Foundational beliefs, one piece at a time. So if you built a really jacked up house, you spent a whole lot of time doing the wrong thing. So if that happens to kids, and then they end up as really jacked up adults, it's a rough deal, right? So what we're going to focus on today is how to get into the kid's head and the kid's life and support the whole kid with our part in the system. And this is how we do it. Like I said, building a house, we start with the foundation, right? Even when the house falls down, what's still there? The foundation. The floods this year, fires, tornadoes, the house might be gone. The foundation might be full of mold, but it's still there. Some people's porches cruise down the river, but no one's foundation cruise down the river. So what if by chance the foundational beliefs that you set weren't right? One of my favorite kids I ever had in all my life, Jamal, he was 19 when I first met him. He's probably 22 or 23 now. When I met him, he was 19 and he had 4 high school credits. When OPS you have to have 49. So if the Lord came back and went to class with him, it wasn't happening for this cat at all. He had 2 babies from 2 different moms. His mother had been in prison his whole life and would be his entire life. Never knew his dad. He had 2 very focused uncles that loved him. Problematically, one was a well-known Crip and one was a well-known Blood. They liked me because Jamal liked me, and we had some riveting conversations, the 4 of us. But where do you start? Where do I start? Nice, silly white lady that had candy in her office. At least I lured him in to have a conversation, but a lot of the things that I brought up as foundational things were not what had already become foundational for him. See where I'm going with the intentional relationship piece? Sometimes it isn't, hey, let's just be buddies and walk in the park. Sometimes you got to backpedal a lot to get back to a starting point. And it wasn't just his life that we were dealing with. He had 2 babies. He had 2 uncles with very different views. Had a chip on his shoulder the size of Manhattan because his mom abandoned him. Came in my office one day and he had his earphones in and he was singing some song about smoking ganja, and so I'm like, hey man, not in my office. He said, well, Miss Busby, you cool? I said, okay, not in my office, okay? Not having this conversation. So he turned it off, sat down. I said, anyway, Jamal, I sat down in my chair, I said, man, you gotta lay off from that. You got babies around, you know. They're listening to you and thinking what's right. And he said, it's not like I hold it out and make them smoke it. I got up and I shut my door, sat back down. I said, so, do you smoke when they're there? He's like, well, duh. It's not like I make them smoke it, Miss Busby. I said, Jamal, you know what happens to your body when this happens? And he's like, yeah. I said, honey, think about what's happening to that little baby. Think about this. And this grown man in front of me started bawling like a big fat baby. He had never had this conversation in his life. 19 years of life. No one had had the appropriate conversation with him about something that seemed glaringly obvious to me. How does that play back into foundational beliefs? Well, there was nothing going to get us through that conversation except the fact that I realized that a whole kid is these things. This is what makes up a whole kid. And this conversation is neutral from what you're doing that's right and what you're doing that's wrong. And what color I am and how old you are and all those things. Doesn't matter. These are the things that make up a whole kid. And if you open up your folder, this one's printed on bright hot pink paper so you can't miss it. Hang it up somewhere. And there's a five-finger test that you can give yourself any moment of the day. When a kid presents you with a negative issue, paradigm shift and think, which one is it that I need to have a conversation with? If a kid's missing school, truancy is an issue, which one of those is your conversation starter? Commitment to learning. If this is a kid who is skipping school or even going to school and then going home and playing Xbox, eating hot Cheetos till 11 o'clock every night, which one of those might be a great opportunity to have a conversation? Do you see what I mean? It's all about 2 things. What are they? Intentional relationship. Not just relationship. Relationships just like character. Everybody has it. For some people it sucks. For some people it's good. Your job is making this an intentional relationship about them becoming self-reliant and able to handle themselves. And who knows? Maybe getting your job someday when you're tired of it. Every kid has complete potential if they have the right relationships built in. Yes?
Has there been any, I'm not research yet, but any data documented, all these kids that are undocumented that really can't go to school, that really can't get a job, that can't even get a driver's license, I mean, they have a very lack of commitment to learning. So how do we approach those kids?
Well, you almost have to approach well, I don't know. That's a touchy one with family, because on a kid who isn't going to be struggling with that, your perfect focus would be family. But in lots of those kids' situations, there's a language barrier, and most of the parents aren't documented either, and so can't have the conversation. Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. I'm not sure the presidential candidates have it figured out from what I've heard in the last few days. Yeah. I don't know. That's a huge one. That would be a great community conversation, to really figure out some odds. The pivotal piece, again, is looking at the positive side. How do we help kids become that? I don't know. I got to chew on that one a little bit. So here's the 5 things and the breakdown of what they are. And the basis of what I've pulled from is from the Search Institute's 40 Developmental Assets. And you'll see a whole lot of copies in there. It's the base of not just what I use in a lot of my presenting and my teaching, but it's the base of what I believe. When I first saw the 40 assets, I thought, well, okay, this isn't rocket science, but it's also not intentional in most places. Most jobs, most youth services, most families, most classrooms. The purpose might be there, but the intention has to be there for it to really be meaningful. And so what I've done with assistance from some folks that I work with in the Building Bright Futures pipeline is really funnel this down into 5 kind of global things. 40 is a whole lot to chew on. But 5 is something that's tangible. And it also, like I said, you have a constant reminder right here all the time. Commitment to learning, service to others, constructive and creative use of time. Right here you can check yourself. You can teach a kid how to do it. You can teach a parent how to do it. You can teach coworkers that don't even always like kids how to do that. Use this to be the initial point of your conversation. And if you can't do it, zip it. I worked for many years at the Hope Center for Kids before my husband and I had our own kids, and I was teaching elementary school, and then I started the Hope Education Center down on 20th and Burdette. And before we even started that, I had a tutoring center in a neighborhood that the kids call New Jack. Anybody seen the movie New Jack City? If you haven't, don't. It's pretty intense. It's about Wesley Snipes goes in and takes over this apartment building and turns it into a drug and a prostitution ring. That was the name of the community that I went into and started a tutoring center. And I loved every minute of it. Loved it. I look back on those days and think, wow, we were doing 40 assets. We were living those things, and we really didn't even know it. But we did know what we were doing. We were building intentional relationships. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't safe. But there were kids there that we don't have anymore because they've fallen to gang violence and they're gone. But when you look back at an opportunity like that, if we could have had this verbiage in the midst of that, all we were doing was this. We were teaching kids to be committed to learning because we set up a tutoring center with some computers and some snacks and some books. To them, they weren't committing to learning. They just wanted to get off the street and hang out with somebody. That's okay. You don't have to come to the same place for the same reason as long as we both get there, right? What about service to others? Well, we were modeling that for them. Didn't even realize that they really noticed. But I have kids now that were 6 or 7 or 8 that got graduated and now go to UNO. And they serve in service clubs with me. Unprompted by me. They're the ones that wanted to start the club. They watched the role model and became it. Constructive and creative use of time. What do most kids do that would live in a community called New Jack? What do you think they do with their time? exactly what's available to do. Nothing. Yeah. Get in trouble. Well, why aren't they in sports leagues? Because it costs too much money. They don't have a ride. Well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Because there's a reason for it. Could most of them tell you the reason for it? Probably not, until someone enters into an intentional relationship and helps them figure that out. But then calls themselves accountable to going to the community and making a change. If we know that kids who aren't involved in 3 to 4 hours a week extracurricular activities are the ones who are on the discipline list and ending up in juvenile justice, really? How do we sleep at night? I don't know. When I finally snapped out of it one day and thought, wow, I got way too much information to just be chilling. I got to do something. There's a level of community activist in every one of us. And in a job like you guys have, a job like I have, the reality is there. One of my favorite kids I ever knew happened to be my nephew. And he was murdered this last March. Now Tony was probably junior high when my husband and I met and got married. He already had been in and out of justice system, in and out of this school, that school, ended up at Alpha, had a huge anger issue. On the other end of that was probably the sweetest kid you'd ever met. You know kids like that. Depends on the flip of the coin, which day you got him, which situation you got him in. Well, I could have showed up in his life a little earlier. Well, I didn't, so I got to let him go. But you can be darn sure that I'm going to stand my ground to make some things change in the community, because there were things not available in his life, on and on and on. Couldn't act right at school, kicked out. Couldn't act right at home, kicked out. Obviously, didn't work, did it? Finally got married and got things straight, ended up in a bad situation this last March. I tell you that story to let you know my passion level, but also to tell you I wasn't the first person to show up in that kid's life. There were other people at school, community, family, etc. Our first gut reaction to just say, stop it. You can't act like that anymore. That's not going to do it. We have to become system changers to make the community support the family and make the family support the youth. How do we do that? This silly little free idea right here. Make sure that those things are available. So stop and reflect for a minute. Is there a place in your community or in your job that is not filling one of those? And you think of a gap that's already there that you could work on. If you pull out the salmon-colored sheet, maybe. Is that the 40 asset one? And I'm going to give you 9 things to circle. Because those 9 things, statistically across the nation, thousands and thousands and thousands of kids have been surveyed with the Developmental Asset Profile tool. And these 9 things came up in all kids who were doing pretty well, academically, socially, emotionally, and behaviorally. The whole kid. These 9 things, so I want you to circle them. Number 5 is the first one. Caring school climate. Well, we got a few schools in town. I don't know. But you do know. So go help and make it right. Number 6, parents involved at school. That's a hard one. Number 9, service to others. What do you think most people think service to others is? Turkeys at Thanksgiving. Right. Those are nice things. But I speak to kids all the time. Service to others might be holding the door open for somebody you don't like. That's a real good one. Smiling. If you can't smile with your mouth, smile with your eyes. Make eye contact with somebody. Some kids don't do those things because nobody ever taught them that. And you've met their families and know that someone never taught their family. There are very easy, tangible things that you can get in a kid's head or a family's head that can make these things come true. Okay, so you have 5, 6, and 9. Jump down to number 16. high expectations. Did you know that most kids don't read billboards? Bizarre statistic. I read it not long ago. Although we as a marketing professional community, we think we're speaking loudly to the world. What do kids read? Facebook, Twitter, stuff that most of us adults don't pay a huge amount of attention to. So if we're going to get in the head of kids, we got to figure out where they're at, where they're thinking, where they're at. Get those marketing pieces there. Say things loudly, like high expectations there. Can you think of a high expectation, a universal high expectation on TV, on a commercial? Nike had a pretty big one. Just do it. What's kind of a high expectation? Great marketing. Can you think of any others? Do you have it? Any of you have your own little taglines? So who here works with somebody else? Because you could probably tell the other person, because it's probably become a habit. Now, do any of you have your own personal taglines? I have one that I didn't realize. I say groovy all the time, I guess. My coworkers have told me that. But they also thank me for it, because it doesn't really mean anything, but it's kind of happy. So, okay. At least I'm known for something good, huh? Okay, jump down to number 18. I'm going to come back to Blackburn, which I will many times because I left a piece of my heart there. What does that say? Somebody read it out loud. Number 18. Yeah, read the whole thing.
Child participates 2 or more times per week in co-curricular school activities or structured community program for children.
No, number 18, yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, there's 2, yeah. 3 to 4 hours a week. They're pretty much the same. They're the same concept, right? The bottom line of it is 3 to 4 hours a week is what kids should be spending in extracurricular activities. My 82-and-a-half-year-old mom lives with us. She argues with us daily. Those kids need to stay home. They run too much. They're going here, they're going there. You guys are all tired all the time. Right, you know what? Our kids aren't going to get everything they need in life from us. We're pretty cool, but we're not that cool. They need to be in accountable relationships with coaches, with pastors, with neighbors, with mentors, with teachers. And if this is our season to suck it up, then that's the way it's going to be. Because they need to be involved. And it's just not me saying it. This is statistically proven. Kids who are involved in 3 to 4 hours of extracurricular activities do pretty well at academic, social, emotional, behavioral. Now, let's just take a quick check. Most of the kids you work with, are they in 3 to 4 hours a week extracurricular activities? Not too many of them. Maybe 4 kids I had that went through the alternative high school system were in some kind of extracurricular activity. Now, some of them, it was there, but their parents said, well, they decided they don't want to go. Okay. So what do you do then? Teach the parents. And more than likely, the parents who said okay weren't involved in extracurricular activities and still aren't. There's a level of modeling that you see. It's very subtle, but it's there. I did this little informal research project at Blackburn, and we took all the names of the kids in the school and put all the kids' names up on the wall. And we gave all the staff a little yellow piece of paper and said to the staff, write your last name on 3 or 4 of these little pieces of sticky notes. And when you're done, go up to the wall and only put the name, the sticky note with your name, next to the kids that you feel like you have a relationship with. Not, oh yeah, his brother was in my class. A relationship with. So what do you think happened? What's that?
They put all the sticky tags on the same
Right, and so we ended up with some kids that had great amounts and a pretty solid trail of kids that nobody even knew. Now some of that was by default. They'd been in jail, they'd been here or there, etc. But still to say, that's really not a foundational belief of the public school system to just have kids that we don't even know who they are. So the next project we did was we took all those kids that had no relationships and we looked at all the discipline lists: expulsion, suspension, detention, etc. To the last name on the list, exactly. Every one of these kids was on this one. Oh, heartbreaking. Wow. Another school we did an informal study. I asked them for a list of all the kids that were in any kind of extracurricular activity: sports, chess club, dance club, church group, whatever, grasshopper club, don't care, as long as they're committed to something. Same list. It left another list of kids who were not committed. Exact replica of the discipline list. That makes me insane. If we know this, we can't just say, shoot. We can't do that. Because those are the same kids that are coming to you. Those are the Tony Busbys of the world that aren't with us anymore. Because somebody knew and just don't have time. I don't know about you, but now that I got my own kids, I ain't going out like that. It can't be. It cannot be. We can't have an okay climate and culture in our community that says, oh, well, too bad you didn't quite make the cut, buddy. Guess you're going down with the ship. I don't know. I'm just not cool with that. And I don't think any of you would be in the job that you're in if that was okay with you. And so we can all decide we're going to save the world on our own, or we can look at a systems approach and figure out where the holes are in the system that don't support those 5 things, and figure out a way to make them filled. When I worked at Hope Center, almost every high school kid that came there drove a car. Not one of them had a driver's license or had been in driver's ed. Let me repeat that. Not one of them had a driver's license or had been in, I don't know whose car they were driving, but they'd drive the car, usually with the whole back load filled with little brothers and sisters and kids from the neighborhood, because they wanted to come to the Hope Center. Whoa! Okay, so we can be mad at their mom because she's working 2 jobs and didn't have time to bring them there. Or we could look at this as a community approach and say, how come most black kids in poverty don't have a driver's license or driver's ed, but they have a car available? Why is that? Well, because driver's ed costs a lot of money and it's kind of a white kid thing, and you got to have a ride there. So did we mean to just box out this entire population of kids that probably 3/4 of them have come through diversion because they hit somebody from driving a car without... You see what I mean? Like, what? If I jumped out of an alien plane and landed here, I think, who are these goofy people? Like, they're setting themselves up to fail. It's a community system issue that we really have to stop and think about. And what have we attained in knowledge and evidence base that can move us through that? So before we go on, there's 4 more things you need to circle on that sheet, because I promised you 9 things that came out in statistics. You notice the first 5 that I gave you already are all external assets. See where it says external? So whose responsibility is that? Right? Not the kids. If the kid doesn't have it, we can't blame them. I can't believe you're not in extracurricular activities. External. We need to find a way for that to happen. Okay, the other 4 are internal. These 4, I tell kids, you can jump up and down and holler all you want. You're accountable for these 4 things. Number 21. Number 22. Number 24. And number 25. Now, 2 issues prevail when we talk about these 4 things. The first 3 are all school stuff. And if you watch the news like I do, you see that every time there's a state budget cut, public school is the first one on the list. So obviously, there's some ongoing change that needs to happen there. The last one there, number 25. Who would read that one for me out loud? Nice and loud.
Reading for pleasure.
Keep going.
Child enjoys and engages in reading for fun most days of the week.
Okay. So, statistically, kids should be involved in 3 hours a week of reading. That comes down to 25.5 minutes a day. The Nathan Hale Middle School kids figured it out because they didn't want to believe me. Here's what will make that meaningful to you. Last year, 2010, in the state of Nebraska as well as across the nation, the average was 3% of folks, adults in prison, 3% were reading proficient. I'm not so good at math, but I think that means 97% were not reading proficient. So how does that come back to kids reading 3 hours a week? Well, the correlation isn't if you don't read 3 hours, you're going to go to jail. That's not the correlation. But it does entice some intense thinking for us about systems approaches. 3 hours a week isn't that big of a deal. What if you aren't reading 3 hours a deal? What might you be doing? Who knows? I love it when I'm speaking, hanging out with kids, and some little guy that thinks I don't know him, and I know he's a major gang kid on the street, and he'll say, that means I'm not out on the street with my friends. Score! He gets it. He figured it out. If you're reading a book, you might learn something, but what might even be more important is that you're not out smoking pot or jacking around with somebody. I mean, that's a huge thing. It's a self-discipline kind of a thing. You know anybody that reads a lot? Pretty self-disciplined by default. So you can kind of learn two things at once. Plus, you reap the benefit of actually learning something if you're reading. Okay, so there you go. 9 things. I challenge you. I think you just have to push real hard. Really hard. No, push. Yeah, there you go. So you've got 9 things now. Statistics that have been proven across the nation for kids ages 12 to 19. These are the kids who have reported these things, and they've done well. Academically, socially, emotionally, behaviorally. Whole kids. You want the kids you're working with to become whole kids. So, let's break these things down. How could we do this? How can you teach kids how to do that? Giving them a sheet of paper with this on it is not going to do it. Giving their parents a sheet of paper with this on it is not going to do that. Giving them ideas of what does it look like and what does it sound like is going to do it. So for the next 5 minutes, I want you to work with, by yourself or people that you work with, and I want you to think some ideas up that you could transfer on to folks in the communities that you live in. What would this look like and sound like? Maybe it's real things like YMCA sports is this season. Maybe it's play Xbox for 1 hour and spend the same amount of time taking the trash out or reading a book. I mean, some people don't do things because really, no one's ever had the conversation with them. So I really want you, don't do this for me, do it for you for the next few minutes so you can take this back with you. Yes, ma'am.
Service to learning. We utilize the RISE program as well, the AmeriCorps, when there's a
Awesome. Sure. So do they work out of the mayor's office?
No, actually we're from a little town, so yeah. So the RISE is actually through the probation.
Cool. Do you all, the rest of you know about that program? RISE, it's called. That's be a good connection. Okay, who else has one?
We've got patrol. We've got a little issue in town is we've got kids that actually serve on patrol and go out and connect with people.
Oh, listen, you and I need to connect. We had we had a group at South High this last year. Well, it's been 2 years since we started it. And graffiti was insane at South High, just out of control. And a large number of kids who already had their first ticket, which means they were going fast to a felony. 2 times graffiti is a felony here. So sadly but true, phenomenal artists. I mean, make your eyes water artists, just tremendous. So we pulled them together, pulled in some community people like me, had an undercover police officer, Paco and Beto, a couple guys that work at the South Boys and Girls Club, etc. Pulled these kids together in a meeting, and they were like, well, how come we're here? Well, no use lying about it. You're here because you got a record, and so we'd like to propose a plan to help you, though. You start getting to school, get yourself in your seat, start getting some grades that are worth something, and the graffiti settles down. Tell us what you want. What do you want? Well, can we have some more markers? I said, I'll buy as many markers as you want. They're going to stay in Miss Bichardo's office. You can leave, if you get your work done, you can leave class early. You can go in between class. We'll help make you famous. But you better start getting to school in your seat with some grades, and the graffiti needs to back off in public places. Okay, well, only about 6 or 7 kids kind of stuck it out. The rest of them kind of filtered away. Well, what happened within the first, I don't know, 6 months maybe? Attendance went up. Graffiti went down. These kids started creating community projects, their ideas, plus the lady they were working with at the school, absolutely fantastic. I ended up taking them to a conference with me here in town and spoke. They did so well, I took them to Houston and spoke at a national conference with me. 3 of them graduated this last year. These were all kids on their way to dropping out. If you're in town, any of you who live in town, go past the 10th and Bancroft building. They've done all 4 sides of it now. About a month ago, they did a community throwdown, they called it, and you had to put in $25, and everybody got one of those cement, like they put in between the lanes out on the highway, barrier thing. $25, you got your own cement barrier and a whole bunch of paint cans, and you got 1 hour to create something, and then whoever had the best one won all the money. I mean, all this did was the adults grew up and realized what those kids were telling us. They're tremendous artists, and they wanted to do art. So we just offered them the appropriate opportunity with lots of intentional relationship involved, and made them famous. They're the Picasso Project. South High Packers and Picasso, so it's called the Picasso Project. Probably, I don't know, a number of months into it, I had a couple articles written on them here in town, and a lady was starting a dance studio out in Elkhorn. She called me and she said, do you think, these kids would want to come out and graffiti the inside of, the thing? I said, well, let me ask them. And they said, oh, miss, we just want to give back to the community. Okay, so you got to get yourself there, got to have your own car. They got out there. I called my husband that morning and I said, hey, let's take a break and both of us go out and take them to lunch. Wise choice. None of them had ever been to Elkhorn before. And so here they are, with their gas masks on, spray painting in here. So I'm like, come on. We go across the street to Boyd and Charlie's or some pretty nice restaurant. So here we were in the restaurant, and we weren't the typical crowd in the restaurant. Okay, so enough said. So we're getting ready to eat, and Angel was sitting next to me, and he leans over with his menu, and he says, Miss, this is my second restaurant. And I looked at him, I was thinking, did you go out for lunch, or what are you talking about? And he said, he closed his menu and he said, well, I don't know if the first one counted because they didn't have these. This child was 18 years old and he'd never eaten in a restaurant that had a menu. And so we're surprised that he found something successful to do in life. Graffiti under bridges was highly successful for him. That was his opportunity. He didn't have the same opportunities as all of us making the decisions in his life. Fantastic. Picasso Project. Google them. Facebook. They got their own Facebook page with, phenomenal art. And they've always got cash in their pocket because they're making stuff and people are buying it all the time. I had them come to I spoke at a Martin Luther King Day thing this last year, so I had them come and set their art up out in the hall. Before it even started, they sold a whole bunch of their art. They all had cash in their pocket, like 7:30 in the morning. Wow, wild. Humbling for me as an adult, an old adult, to think, how do you miss something glaring beautifully in your face as that? Tremendous artists, great charisma, but they got caught up in the system because their desires didn't match our desires. Wow. So, as we move on here, we're going to talk a little bit now about you guys and your utilization efforts. What you wrote down was very initial level utilization. How do you take a concept and make it tangible for yourself? And how do we tie in now evidence-based model and tools to support that? Because we can all have a million great ideas. I had a great idea one time, and it's the last great idea I had about that. It was to wallpaper in my bathroom, and I was horrible at it, and as soon as I put it up, I ripped it all down, and I'll never do that again. Okay, it's just an example of where good ideas can go if you don't support them with the right things. I should have hired someone else. Okay, so this isn't just a great idea I'm sharing. It's evidence-based. 40 Assets support it. Gallup Strength Finder supports it. Positive Behavior Intervention supports this. It's all the same concept. And it's positive youth engagement through a developmental model. What does that mean? Engagement means I entice you into wanting to be part of it. Development means I support you enough that by the time you get to the end of the line, you don't need me anymore. See what I'm saying? You guys have other things unwritten in your job description. You have to engage people, first of all, to want to work with you. They have to work with you, right? How many people just show up your office and say, I'd like to have a meeting with you today? How many kids? Right. Default, you're set up. They're coming to you because they have to. So now the hardest part is for you to engage them into an intentional relationship so you can help them develop so they won't come back. But the only way that will happen is if you've actually set those standards for them. And you've helped them figure out that they need a caring school climate. They need to connect with somebody at school. They need a family member involved at school. If they don't have one, who is? You got a grandma? You got an auntie? You got a neighbor lady? Where's your school? I'll come. Need somebody. Those are the tangible pieces. Why I shared those 9 points on 40 assets. There's your utilization. There's your walking papers. That's what's going to make you successful in making kids successful. Those things are statistically sound, and these are evidence-based models to support it. So, let's think about these questions for a second. How do youth in a community trust that they will receive what they need to be successful? Now, you know as well as I do, most of them don't even think about it till it's too late, or till they already figured it out. How do families receive the help and opportunities that they need to support their youth? Just my opinion, but I really don't think that families need to worry about that. We do. We're getting paid for that. How do schools ensure that staff embrace evidence-based approaches to help them focus on youth strengths instead of their risk factors? Now, what part is yours in that, since you all don't work at schools? What's your part in making sure that schools focus on youth strengths instead of risk factors? When you guys fill out reports, what are they usually full of? Right. Not because you want them to be, because that's what the system has told you to do. When I became a high school administrator, I would call families and tell them how great their kids did. And you would have thought someone passed out on the other end because there was no breath, nothing. Hello? Mrs. So-and-so? Just called to let you know John had a good day at school today. Is this Miss Busby at Blackburn? Yes. Are you calling about my John? Yes. They never had those phone calls. And it wasn't just the school's fault. They hadn't had them from anywhere. Anywhere in the community, anywhere. No wonder they didn't like their kids. No wonder their kids were mean. Again, if you dropped out of a ship and just showed up here, we got some bad system things going on. We're feeding the wrong dog. How do we figure these things out so at the end of the day we can go, phew, I did good today. Not just good at filling my paperwork out, but I did good at helping everybody really like kids. Did any of you have anybody in your life as a kid that liked you? Do you know any kids that couldn't answer that? It just breaks my heart. How do we ensure that these things happen in our community? How does the community ensure, and that's you, that value-enriched positive process and protocol become the way of life for strength-focused programming? Well, you look at some of the tools that were gone over this morning. They helped you pinpoint the deficit issue, but there really was opportunity to match that up with the strength-based. And the next piece of what I'm going to talk about is really to get into the 40 asset stuff, because it's not rocket science. When kids don't come to school, and then they do come to school, we win. We had an empty hole, and we filled it up with a good thing. How do you prove that that's happening, though, because of intentional relationship? I don't know. But I know the kids that hit 31 on those 40 are in a safe zone, and those are the kids that do well socially, emotionally, behavioral, academically. Those are not the kids on your lists. So how do you quit thinking about these kids for a second and think about these kids and figure out how did they get over here on this list, on the good list, and how do you get these kids over there? The next piece of what we're going to talk about is some of those tactics, and what does that mean? So, what are 40 developmental assets? Well, that's pretty easy. There's 40 of them, and it must be a developmental process, which means you start here and you end up here. So the ultimate question would be, what is an asset? Anybody have an answer for me? A positive piece of the puzzle. Okay. What else is an asset?
Something that's going to help you succeed.
Okay. How do you think most kids answer that? Ice? Bling? Money. Kids get that conversation. You don't have money in this pocket, and you do have money in this pocket. Which pocket do you like better? This one. All right, now we can talk. We can talk about assets. Same thing. Assets aren't something you get and keep forever. You got to work at them, just like money. How do you leave here today, though, taking all of these tools and being able to match them up in a matrix with assets? If a kid doesn't have this, how do you match it to what they do need and make it happen? If you don't have a good adults, good role modeling in your life, let's find a mentoring group and hook you up. If you don't like to read every day, but you need to be reading 3 hours a week, let's hook you into somebody in some program that'll help you get there. So, intentional, meaningful relationship. This is probably the biggest piece. Positive asset building is not a place we go. It's not a holiday. It's a habit. It's not a choice. It shouldn't be a choice. It should be a habit. So, I'll just warn you, the next part of this conversation is going to be about you. Because we as adults have to stop and check what model we're setting and what we are emanating. Because even like I tell my 8-year-old twins, you might only be 8, but you're a teacher. There's somebody watching everything you do. You roll your eyes, I guarantee you the 4-year-old down the block is going to roll his eyes. I guarantee you his mama calls me, I'm putting you on the phone. Because I didn't teach you that. You guys think I'm joking. I'm not. So, 40 assets. If you were playing with building blocks, you stack them up. Same concept with assets. Just like negative things, we talked about attendance rarely is alone, right? It stacks up. So, we have to stack up more developmental things to rival the negative things that are stacking up. 8 categories, 20 external, 20 internal. Which one do you think is more important? The external categories or the internal? Internal? Anybody run a rivaler? Why do you think the internal is more important? Do you know anybody that doesn't have the internal? And I bet they didn't have the external either. Right? So that's a chicken or the egg question. I don't know that one is more important than the other. Because you're right, internal is part of you, but rarely do you see the internals visible if the externals aren't there. So for the kind of work that we all do, the external almost has to take more precedent first to uncover the internals. In counseling, we call that the onion. Everybody is an onion. Some people are little onions, some people are big ones, based on how many layers of hardness you let grow. Some people are real big onions, and you got a lot of work to unfold the layers till you get to the real kid inside. Even the old ones still got a kid inside. So, support, empowerment. Boundaries and expectations, constructive use of time. Huge. Remember this one? What did it look like? Caring school climate, parents at school. What did this one look like? Service to others. Our kids do number 9 every Sunday afternoon. Anybody know what number 9 is? Look on your list. My husband works at the community center down the street from our house. And so we go down, and he's working, and I get to work out, and the kids get to go in the room that they never get to go in, the big people workout room with the machines, but they get to take the spray cleaner and the wipe. They love it. They go in and get to clean off all the machines. They think it's real cool because they're not really supposed to be in there. You know, kids aren't supposed to go in there. And then they say to people, oh, we did number 9, and you can see people kind of glaze over like, what? Boundaries and expectations. High expectations, constructive use of time, being involved in extracurricular activities. Pick one kid that might be somebody you're working with right now. One kid. Are they missing any of those 5 that we just talked about? Is there one of those 5 things that you could embrace right now to help them get in their life? Either helping their family get to school or... And you know it's only going to happen out of what? Intentional relationship. Piece of paper, the judge demanding them to... I don't know how many kids showed up at the door of Blackburn, and they'd stand at the door and look me right in the eye. I'm sure you're nice, Miss Busby, but you can F off if you think I'm coming in here and doing jack today. The judge says I got to come, that's it. Get out of my face. So, I was handed the professional opportunity to decide. Do I spend my entire day trying to schmooze this child into listening for 2 minutes? Or do I work with the other 201 kids that are there with the same issues? Hard. Sure wish there was somebody else in that kid's life that helped him with a couple of those things before he got to the school, and the school got in trouble for not doing it. It's all a team thing, team effort. Oh. Here's the internals. Did you notice when I gave you those last 4, they all were in commitment to learning? So what does that mean about these things? Because you know as well as I do, this is a pretty big hang-up for most kids that are having some issues in life. Huge. This one, huge. I have kids tell me all the time, yeah, how do you feel about yourself? Good. What do you think about your future? You going to have a good future? Oh, yeah. What are you going to do? I don't know. So, in fact, you don't have a real good view of your future. Where do you think you're going to live? I'm going to stay at my mom's till I can get some things worked out. Okay. Got a job yet? No, I just can't quite find what I really want to do. All right. We've been around that block, huh? Wow. What's the missing link? Well, tangible ideas for them of how to do it. And every one of those kids missing intentional relationship in all the communities in their life. As I tell school staff all the time, when a child presents you with a behavior, more than likely it wasn't their idea. They're either reflecting their home life, their peer groups, their relationship with you. But who gets in trouble for it? They do. Once again, there's a misnomer in the system piece there. That if we know enough about it, we can either say, okay, I'm okay with that. Or we can say, no, I'm not okay with that. If I actually know that these are the things that are causing kids to die, to get killed, to drop out, I'm not okay with that. And I wasn't even okay with that before this year. This year, in fact, though, In that week that we lost my nephew, we lost 2 other boys to violence as well. In 8 days, my husband and I lost 3 boys, all in separate situations. Horrifying. Horrifying to have that conversation with our kids. How come Eddie's not coming over anymore, Mom? Because someone shot him. Note to self somewhere. Anchor what you speak to families and kids with something, and they'll remember it more. Just like a boat. You get a boat somewhere and drop the anchor, it'll stay there. Give them an anchor. Something visual, a statement that you can revisit. It's your anchor that will bring them. When they hear that or when they see that, it'll bring them back to what you said. And so this final, very quick activity is an anchor. You have 2 pieces of paper you're getting. On one of them, I want you to write down something that you think is a stress point for the kids that you work with. What's that? Yeah, write down something that you think is a stress point for them. Anything. School, showing up at school, their family, their parents got a divorce, they have acne, anything. Anything that you think would be a stress point for the kids that you work with. And on the other sheet of paper, I'd like you to do the same thing. So you should have 2 stress point papers talking about things that might compromise your kids doing well. Monica, would you come up and help me? Monica's going to be our representative. In fact, will you just stand right here? She's going to be our representative kid, okay? So I want you to pick up one of your pieces of paper, and very loudly, I want you to read what's on it when I count to 3. Very loudly. 1, 2, 3. Great. Monica, can you tell me what they said? No, right. Because it's stress. And that's what stress does. And stress is a major piece of what's hurting kids today and society at large. And what's happening right now is we were all yelling at you and looking at you, and you couldn't figure it out. In the face, please. Thank you. All right, so how are you feeling now? Right, so now we were yelling at you, and we threw things at you, and we hit you, and now we're all laughing at you too. All righty. So now I need, will you be her mom and stand by her? Will you be her coach and stand by her? And will you be her juvenile justice worker and stand by her? All right, now I'm going to count to 3, and I want you to read the second sheet of paper, okay? Very loudly. 1, 2, 3. Any better that time? No, okay. Except the next part is going to be better because you 3 are going to protect her. Do whatever you need to do. Do not get her hit by a piece of paper, okay? When I count to 3, let her have it. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's give them all a round of applause. So, before you guys go, though, Monica, how was it that time when they were coming at you?
Better, I felt.
Protected, okay. And protectors, how did it feel?
A little stressful.
Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Fulfilling.
Yeah.
I had nothing coming at me.
Okay. All right. But y'all kind of had your game face on there, right? Something that I think happens every time is when it's all over and done, there's a different kind of laughter. There's kind of a joyous laughter that she was protected. That happens every time I do this activity. So what's the anchor in that? What's the visual that you can take away from that activity? What do kids need? Support. In lots of realms. In all of their communities of engagement. Their peers, their family, their school, and the community at large. And they need to be aware of it because they're aware of the stress. They need to be made aware of who those people are in those areas that can be their support system.